It started with a single invasion that changed the balance of power in Europe. When Russia rolled its tanks into Ukraine, the world watched in disbelief. But the United Kingdom didn't just watch. It moved. From military aid to financial backing, the UK has become one of Kiev's loudest and most loyal allies. So far, London has poured in roughly £21.8 billion, or about $28 billion, to help Ukraine defend itself. But that's only part of the story. Now, Britain is taking things a step further, diving into Ukraine's fast-growing drone manufacturing industry, signaling that its support isn't just about defense anymore. It's about helping Ukraine build its own technological muscle for the long fight ahead. And just when it seemed like the pressure couldn't get any tighter, the UK decided to twist the economic screws even harder. In mid-October, the British government dropped what it's calling its toughest sanctions yet, a sweeping move that could choke off Russia's final major economic arteries. Over 90 Russian-linked entities and vessels have been hit, along with 5 key individuals and 35 major companies, including 2 powerhouses that fuel much of the Kremlin's war machine, Rosneft and Lukoil. These aren't just any companies, they're the beating heart of Russia's fossil fuel empire, the source of the cash that keeps missiles flying and tanks moving. Now, here's where things get interesting and a little unsettling. These sanctions don't just hit at the surface, they're aimed straight at the core of Russia's global oil dominance. Rosneft, for instance, isn't some mid-tier energy firm. It pumps out nearly half of Russia's oil every year, making up roughly 6% of the world's total oil production. That means any ripple affecting Rosneft doesn't just reach Moscow, it shakes global markets too. For years, the company thrived under Putin's watch, reaping enormous profits from the chaos his invasion unleashed. In 2024, Rosneft's profits soared by 47.2%, raking in over $14 billion. Money that conveniently flowed into the Kremlin's tax coffers to help bankroll the war. But here's where the tide seems to be turning. 2025 hasn't been kind to Rosneft. According to Reuters, its net income for the first half of the year plunged 68%, wiping out nearly $3 billion in value. Officially, the company blames falling oil prices and OPEC restrictions. But many experts believe it's the growing wall of Western sanctions, especially those from the UK, that's finally starting to squeeze the oxygen out of Russia's energy sector. Top trending questions people are asking right now are, how will these new UK sanctions actually impact Russia's economy long-term? Could cutting off oil giants like Rosneft and Lukoil cause a global spike in energy prices? Is the UK's push for drone collaboration with Ukraine part of a broader military strategy against Russia? What happens if Russia responds with counter-sanctions or cyber attacks? And perhaps the biggest one, are these sanctions enough to truly hurt Putin's war machine or just another temporary sting? Let's dig deeper. By mid-2025, the world oil market was flooded. There was more crude than the world knew what to do with, a surplus of 2.6 million barrels every single day, according to Reuters. That extra supply kept prices low, frustrating oil producers everywhere, especially in Moscow. Analysts predicted the surplus would shrink to about 2.2 million barrels a day by 2026, giving companies like Rosneft a small glimmer of hope. They were banking on just hanging tight until demand picked back up. The idea was simple: survive long enough for the market to heal. But then came Britain's latest move, a blow that turned that fragile hope into a nightmare. The new sanctions don't just block Rosneft from selling crude oil directly to the UK. They go further, closing every possible loophole. Even if Rosneft's oil ends up in another country, let's say it's refined into gasoline or diesel somewhere else, it still won't make a dime from it if those products are later sold to the UK. The message is loud and clear: no profits for Russia, no matter how indirect the route. Meanwhile, Lukoil, Russia's other energy titan, has been taking heavy punches of its own. The problems Rosneft is now facing? Lukoil's been living them for a while. Its profits have been sliding, its production shrinking, and the pressure mounting. Back in March, the Moscow Times reported that Lukoil's profits fell by more than 26% in 2024, dropping to $10.1 billion from $13.7 billion the year before. Sure, it was still in the black, with over $102 billion in revenue, but for a company used to endless growth, the decline was like watching cracks spread across the foundation. And then came 2025, the year the cracks began to split wide open. On September 29th, Upstream Online revealed that Lukoil's oil and gas production had plunged to its lowest level in 4 years. The steady fall that began back in 2023 had now reached a point unseen since Russia's invasion began. For a firm that once symbolized the strength of Putin's energy empire, it was a brutal reality check. Lower output meant fewer exports, smaller profits, and a growing sense that the golden age of easy oil money might finally be over. Just as Lukoil was trying to steady itself, the UK stepped in with a move that felt almost surgical, a direct strike to the jawline of Russia's economy. London's latest sanctions package didn't just name and shame, it cut off entire revenue streams. Both Rosneft and Lukoil are now locked out of the British market, but that's not where the squeeze ends. Here's the real kicker. The UK also banned imports of oil products refined in third countries if those products can be traced back to Russian crude. In plain terms, even if another country buys Russian oil, refines it into gasoline or jet fuel, and then tries to sell it to the UK, that door is now slammed shut. It's a bold move known as a secondary sanction, targeting not just Russia itself, but anyone who dares to help it make money from its oil. For Putin's energy giants, this isn't just bad news, it's existential. The world's fifth-largest economy has effectively built a wall around Russian oil, leaving companies scrambling to find buyers in riskier markets. Tankers now take longer routes. Deals are done in secret. Middlemen appear and disappear overnight, and every day, the walls close in just a little tighter. To really grasp the weight of these new sanctions, you have to look at how Russia's been playing the system, and for a while, winning. Even as Western countries slammed their doors shut on Russian oil, Moscow found a clever detour. It didn't need to sell directly to the UK or the EU anymore. All it had to do was find a middleman. Enter India, one of the biggest winners of this energy reshuffle. When the war in Ukraine began, global sanctions left Russia desperate for buyers. Prices of its crude oil tumbled, and India saw an opportunity too good to ignore. Almost overnight, Indian refineries started buying up Russian oil at bargain prices, oil that other countries refused to touch. One refinery in particular became the symbol of this quiet energy revolution, the Jamnagar refinery, run by an Indian company called RIL. Before the war, Russian crude made up just 3% of what Jamnagar imported. Fast forward to 2025, and that figure has skyrocketed to 50%. According to Al Jazeera, in the first 7 months of 2025 alone, Jamnagar brought in 18.3 million tons of Russian oil, a 64% increase compared to the same period in 2024. And that's just one facility. Across India, the same pattern repeats. Cheap Russian oil flows in, refined fuels flow out, and profits rise on both ends. Russia still earns money from its oil, even if it's technically sold as Indian. India gets discounted crude, at one point up to $25 cheaper per barrel, according to Reuters, and sells refined products to countries that won't buy directly from Russia. It's a win-win for everyone except the nations trying to cut off Putin's war chest. That's exactly where the UK's latest sanctions come crashing in. London has closed the loophole. Now, any country that refines Russian crude and then tries to sell those refined fuels to the UK faces an impossible choice. Either stop buying Russian oil altogether or lose access to the British market. Drop Russia and you pay more for oil. Drop the UK and you lose one of your most lucrative customers. Either way, it hurts. And that's the point. Britain's goal isn't just to punish Moscow, but to undercut the entire network that helps Russia stay afloat. And the damage doesn't stop with oil. The UK has widened its reach into another of Russia's cash-rich industries, liquefied natural gas, or LNG. Even though Britain banned direct LNG imports from Russia back in January 2023, this sector still brings Moscow billions every year. How? Through what experts call a shadow fleet, a network of unregistered or reflagged ships quietly carrying Russian fuel across the world under fake identities. These tankers sail in the dark, turning off tracking systems, transferring cargo at sea, and operating through shell companies designed to hide their true origins. The Center for Research on Energy and Clean Air estimated that in September 2025 alone, Russia earned between $43 and $44 million per day from LNG sales, roughly $1.3 billion in just 1 month. That's money feeding directly into the Kremlin's war machine. So the UK struck again, announcing sanctions on 7 specialized LNG tankers and even targeting a Chinese terminal, Beihai LNG, for helping Russia move its gas. According to G-Captain, Beihai received its first Arctic LNG-2 shipment on August 28th and quickly became a vital stop for Russian exports. Now, that same terminal and the ships feeding it have been blacklisted. The message is the same one London has been sending since the start. No more backdoors, no more middlemen, and no more silent profits funding a war that refuses to end. Before the latest sanctions hit, Russia's Arctic LNG-2 project was already limping. U.S. sanctions imposed in 2023 had made life nearly impossible for the company behind it. Buyers were vanishing, deals were collapsing, and even Russia's closest partners were getting cold feet. For months, China, one of Moscow's most important customers, hesitated. Beijing feared that if it accepted shipments from Arctic LNG-2, it could get caught in the web of U.S. secondary sanctions, restrictions that punish not just Russia, but anyone who dares to do business with it. That hesitation faded after Putin's meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump in Alaska, a rare and unexpected moment of diplomacy that sent mixed signals to the global energy market. Soon after, China began importing from Arctic LNG-2, cautiously at first, then with growing confidence. But now, the UK has stepped in to do exactly what China was once afraid Washington would do: implement its own secondary sanctions on anyone helping move Russian gas. It's true, Britain's economic weight isn't the same as America's, but the symbolism is powerful. The UK's actions add another layer of pressure on an already struggling Russian project. For Putin, Arctic LNG-2 isn't just another export line, it's a cornerstone of his strategy to keep energy money flowing even as Europe and the US turn away. Every obstacle that slows it down chips away at Russia's last dependable source of hard currency. And the sanctions don't stop there. London has widened its scope to include one of India's biggest refiners, Naira Energy, accusing it of processing 100 million barrels of Russian crude in 2024, oil worth about $5 billion. According to British officials, Naira made substantial profits by turning Russian crude into refined products and selling them abroad, effectively helping Moscow bypass Western restrictions. The move is a clear signal that India's role in Russia's workaround economy hasn't gone unnoticed. Then comes the part that truly rattles Moscow: the UK's decision to sanction 44 ships belonging to Russia's so-called shadow fleet. On the surface, that might seem symbolic. After all, Russia has poured an estimated $14 billion into building this covert network of tankers since the start of the war. These ships operate in the gray areas of global trade: old, weathered vessels that switch flags, fake their ownership records, and sail under false identities. They disappear from radar by turning off their tracking systems, making them ghosts on the open sea. But Britain's move cuts deeper than it looks. Each sanctioned vessel becomes a marked target, a signal that its movements are being tracked. The message is simple: we know who you are and what you're carrying. That makes it far riskier for these tankers to operate near British or Allied waters. Every sanctioned ship now has to alter its routes, adding time, cost, and uncertainty to Russia's already fragile export chain.
If you've made it this far into the video, it means you're enjoying what we do here at Euro Bulletin. Take a second to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss more updates and insights from Europe and its partners. Let's dive in more into the subject.
The sanctions also tie into another key pressure point: the price cap on Russian oil. Both the EU and the UK have set that ceiling at $47.60 per barrel. Any Russian shipment sold above that price risks punishment. The shadow fleet has been Moscow's way to dodge that rule, selling oil slightly below the global rate but above the Western cap to make extra profit. Now, with these vessels under sanction, that workaround just got a lot more dangerous. Ships that are caught violating the cap can be seized, and their cargoes confiscated. In some cases, Russia ends up permanently docking these tankers because sailing them simply isn't worth the risk anymore. The money spent buying and maintaining them, billions of dollars, effectively sinks with the ships themselves. Every vessel sidelined means fewer ways for Russia to move its oil and gas, fewer buyers willing to take the gamble, and another crack forming in the financial scaffolding holding up Putin's war. Piece by piece, sanction by sanction, the UK has built a trap, one designed not to make headlines, but to quietly choke off the invisible trade routes that have kept Russia's energy empire alive. And now, that invisible empire is beginning to flicker. The message from London couldn't be clearer. Britain isn't just tightening the screws on Russia, it's cranking them with intent. Standing at the center of this new wave of sanctions, UK Chancellor Rachel Reeves made her position unmistakable. As Putin's aggression intensifies, we are stepping up our response, she declared. The UK will continue to strip away the funding that fuels his war machine. We will hold to account all those enabling his illegal invasion of Ukraine. That last line hit differently, because for the first time, it wasn't only about Russia. It was also about the countries helping Moscow stay afloat. The reference to all those enabling makes it clear that Britain's patience is wearing thin with nations like India and China, which have quietly become lifelines for Russian oil and gas. The UK isn't just fighting a war of sanctions against a single country anymore. It's challenging the entire network that keeps Putin's economy breathing. Reeves's colleague, Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper doubled down on that message. At this critical moment for Ukraine, Europe is stepping up, she said in a joint press briefing. Together, the UK and our allies are piling the pressure on Putin, going after his oil, gas, and shadow fleet. And we will not relent until he abandons his failed war of conquest and gets serious about peace. Cooper didn't mince words about the state of Russia's military either, describing unthinkable losses and a war economy that's already creaking. The UK, she vowed, intends to help turn that creak into a full-blown collapse. And then, in a move that almost seemed designed to twist the knife, Britain chose its timing with precision. The new sanctions were unveiled just as Russia was preparing to host its annual Energy Week. The event, running since 2016, is one of Putin's favorite stages for projecting confidence. According to Russia's state news agency TASS, the theme this year was almost ironic: building the energy of the future together. Putin himself was scheduled to headline the plenary session, hoping to showcase Russia's resilience to the world. Instead, he'll be stepping onto that stage under a storm of fresh UK sanctions that directly attack the very foundation of his message. The blow couldn't have landed at a more symbolic moment. Putin may still be standing, but this was a hit that made him stagger. And he knows another one is already on its way. Because while Britain has acted alone this time, it's not standing alone for long. The European Union is now finalizing its 19th sanctions package, one that sources say could push even further than London's. According to Politico, the EU's upcoming round is set to widen the battlefield, targeting not just Russian companies but also entities in Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and the United Arab Emirates, countries accused of quietly helping Russia move its energy products through back channels. A draft version of the sanctions list even contained a blank space for third country ports that receive Russian shipments, a placeholder waiting to be filled once European investigators finish tracing the routes. With the UK's sanctions freshly announced, Brussels now has a roadmap of what to aim for next. Everything about this latest British package, from the timing to the targets, was calculated to strike at Russia's weakest spot: its energy-dependent economy. Without oil, without gas, without those billions of export dollars pouring in, Russia's financial system begins to unravel. Economists have long called it the energy curse, or more precisely, a form of Dutch disease, where a nation grows so reliant on a single resource that everything else starts to decay around it. That's the trap Moscow built for itself. And now, it's being turned against them. Putin's empire may still run on oil, but the pipelines are tightening, and the world is beginning to see the cracks. These sanctions aren't just about numbers or policy. They're about pressure, persistence, and the quiet power of economics in modern warfare. The UK has drawn a clear line in the sand. Every ship sanctioned, every refinery blacklisted, every loophole closed is another move in a slow, grinding campaign to make Russia's war machine buckle under its own weight. But with every move the UK and its allies make, Moscow finds new ways to adapt. Oil still flows, not as freely, not as profitably, but enough to keep the Kremlin's engines running for now. And as Russia turns eastward, forging deeper ties with nations willing to ignore the West's warnings, the question becomes, how long can this shadow economy survive before it collapses under its own secrecy? Meanwhile, the world is watching. Markets shift, alliances tremble, and the rules of global energy are being rewritten in real time. What happens when the pressure finally hits a breaking point? Will Russia's economy crack, or will it find yet another way to endure? Could China and India stay neutral forever, or will they be forced to choose sides when the cost of doing business with Moscow becomes too high? And perhaps the biggest question of all, what comes next when the sanctions stop working and the world runs out of financial weapons to use? The pieces are moving, the stakes are rising, and the next chapter is already being written somewhere behind closed doors. If you've been following this story and want to stay ahead of every twist, subscribe to The Military Show and turn on notifications. Your support helps us keep uncovering how power, politics, and pressure are shaping the future of this global conflict. Stay tuned, because what's coming next might just change the game entirely.